Support for the Blueprint podcast comes from the SANS Institute. If you like the topics covered in this podcast and would like to learn more about Blue Team fundamentals, such as host and network data collection, threat detection, alert triage, threat intelligence, and more, check out my new course, Sec 450 Blue Team Fundamentals. This course is designed to bring attendees the information that every SOC analyst and Blue Team member needs to know to hit the ground running, including 15 labs that get you hands-on with tools for threat intelligence, SIM, incident management, automation, and much, much more. This course is everything you need to launch your Blue Team career. Check out the details at sansurl.com/450. Hope to see you in class.
This is the Blueprint Podcast, bringing you the latest in cyber defense and security operations from top Blue Team leaders. Blueprint is brought to you by the SANS Institute and is hosted by SANS certified instructor John Hubbard. And now, here's your host, John Hubbard.
In this episode of the Blueprint Podcast, we speak with Tanya Janka of We Hack Purple about AppSec, DevOps, and DevSecOps. We discuss what they are, why you need to know about them, and the consequences of ignoring these new and critical fields. Even if you aren't a programmer, these technologies are quickly paving the way into the future of IT operations, and not knowing what they are means you'll quickly be left behind, which of course no one wants. So buckle in and let's discuss your role as a Blue Teamer in the new world of DevSecOps today on the Blueprint Podcast. All right. So today on the podcast, we have founder and CEO of the We Hack Purple Academy, accomplished application security author, podcast host, DevSecOps expert, Tanya Janka. Tanya, thank you so much for making time in what I'm sure is a very busy schedule to be on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, John.
So as I have hinted at with the intro here, you have your hands in a ton of different subjects and expertises. Could you give our listeners a little bit about your background and your expertise?
Sure. I was a dev for a really long time, I think around 17 years. And then I met a hacker and he said, you should work in security. And I was like, no, security's lame. Writing software's the best. But I've also been a professional musician for most of my life. And he was in a band too. So then obviously our bands had to play together and we became friends. And for a year and a half, he just broke me down slowly until I agreed to try to become a pen tester. Very opposite of most people's interaction with how to get into security. And then I was briefly a pen tester before I discovered that there is this field called application security, which is sort of halfway between the security team and the dev team, if that makes sense. And also that you got to be social, you got to hang out with devs, you still got to smash things. I'm like, this is the best of all the worlds. And so I've been doing application security for quite a few years now and just totally loving it.
Very, very cool. So, everyone always has an interesting story on how they get into InfoSec. So I love hearing the various routes that people take. So AppSec and DevOps and this kind of world that you live in is not something we've covered on this podcast before. So I wanted to make sure before we kind of dive into the meat of it, for those listeners who might not also be in this world, and I'll start off with saying I'm not really in that world specifically. So excuse if I have dumb questions. AppSec, DevOps, and all of that. Let's start off with what is application security to you on like a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So application security, the idea of it is it's all the things that you do to try to make sure that the custom software or even the software you buy is actually secure, or it's at a security posture that you feel safe using it. And so that can mean for me, teaching a whole bunch of devs about a mistake that I keep seeing in their code. It can be about adding some extra security tests to their pipeline. It can mean me doing some security testing or automating a bunch of tests to go out and then like reviewing the results, talking to the dev about the results, and then usually quite a bit of negotiation about, well, I know you have this deadline Friday, but there's this one critical that really has me concerned. And so there's like a lot of social stuff and talking and persuasion. So you might be awesome at sales if you're awesome at AppSec. So it's kind of that job where you're the one that, you know, kind of makes sure all the steps happen during the system development lifecycle so that your app is in good shape at the end. And you sort of try to teach the devs and enable them to make secure apps.
Gotcha. So I'm sure I know the answer to this, but to make it explicit, what are the consequences or issues that arise if you do not pay attention to this? What's the common big impacts you see for failures?
So I've seen a lot. I've seen some where there's going to be an acquisition and merger, and then the company looks and all the apps are really old and legacy and awful, and they're just totally dumpster fires of security problems, and then the acquisition doesn't happen. I've seen it where just so many companies are dealing with security incidents basically all the time. Their staff's super stressed out, and then that means they can't do all the projects and normal stuff they're supposed to be doing. I've seen quite often, we've heard of ransomware, we've heard of malware and stuff. So there are different types of attacks that happen on software than that. But basically where there are attacks where people can try to steal the data out of your app, or where they can try to take the data and change it, where they can bring your app down so it can't get back up, stealing secrets. Basically, all the badness that could happen with a computer can definitely happen with software.
So I was expecting the technical, obviously security breaches, John, answer, but you took it much further than that, right? Your business, M&As might be broken for bad AppSec. That's a serious, high level, full business visibility problem.
Yeah, I consult at a place, and so we would advise on acquisitions and mergers, and they actually took $10 million off of the price because of how much AppSec they were going to have to do. They're like, there's no AppSec program where you work. None of your staff have ever been trained. All your apps are just we ran a scanner on it and it looked like a Christmas tree turning on. And we're just, no. So it has financial consequences and also consequences for real people. So it can result in, for instance, someone attacked a water system in the United States and poisoned, I think, 15,000 people recently. And that could have resulted in death. It's absolutely terrifying. And so all of this is software. Yeah, absolutely. Very, very large consequences, clearly, with AppSec. What is it that makes getting this right so difficult? Is it that this is a newer field that people haven't been really considering in the past because they're like, let's just make it work and then we'll make it secure? What has brought about these failures? I would say there's a couple things. So I took computer science in the 90s and there was no security class. And you would think by now that there would be tons of security class in universities or college. No. So when I talk to students, I guest lecture at universities quite often, and I'll ask them, so who here has heard of application security before? And no hands go up. I'm like, who here has heard of DevSecOps before or DevOps? And no hands go up. Oh boy. And then I'm like, who here has heard of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the CIA, the mandate of every security team? And there's one cautious hand at the back. And that upsets me. I know I'm throwing the gauntlet down a bit, but academia just they're teaching and graduating 1 million computer science and software engineering students around the planet every year, approximately, and teaching them how to make insecure apps. If you look at the boot camps, I know that you're not an AppSec person, you're a hardcore security in general person, but the Hello World app that every single boot camp, every single new language they teach you. And the first thing they teach you is to put stuff on the screen that says Hello World. But the second lesson is always, how can we read input from the screen? And so they teach everyone to read the input, not validate it or check it to see if it's dangerous. And then they teach them to output it right onto the screen without output encoding. And that is the exact recipe for cross-site scripting. And then we're like, why do we have cross-site scripting in every app? I'm like, because we've taught them well with the Hello World lesson. Yeah, I mean, I've done that myself, right? I went through C and various coding classes. And I was definitely never taught any of that stuff. Why do you think that is? Is that because the mindset is hey, let's just show them how to make it work first, and then later on we'll teach security, but that day never comes? Where would you put this in a curriculum for a coder going through, a university or whatever? I would say it totally makes sense to not teach them in the very first lesson about security, absolutely, and teach them the idea of input and output and all of those things. But I would intertwine little tiny lessons from the beginning because I'm very biased and I love AppSec. But also because teaching someone how to do something wrong repeatedly for a long time means that's where their muscle memory is. Like, I don't know if you've ever played an instrument, but I play drums and guitar. And so like once I learned how to do basic drum beats, then I could just sing at the same time. But if I needed to learn like a more complicated drum beat, I couldn't sing anymore. And so if we drill into them the wrong way for a long time, their muscle memory will keep going back to that, unfortunately. So again, like me throwing the gauntlet down with academia, I feel like it's a big pyramid scheme. So the way that, you have to be a PhD to teach, to become tenured, and only some people become tenured. And then if you aren't willing to go through their big scheme, then you teach as an adjunct professor. And do you know how much adjunct professors get paid? It's basically volunteer work. I've had all these universities reach out to me and they're like, oh yeah, we want you to teach AppSec for us. And I'm like, great, that sounds awesome. I have an amazing course. I have a bunch of courses. I wrote a book. I'm like, yeah, I'm down. And then they're like, we would like to pay you 4,000 Canadian dollars, which is approximately 3,000 American dollars. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, so you're going to teach 2 times per week and then mark courses. Plus there's a lab time. So it'll be around 12, 15 hours per week for 16 weeks. And I'm like, oh, so the $4,000 is per week? And they're like, no, that's for the whole thing. And I'm just like, I can work at McDonald's and make better money. Are you kidding? And they're like, well, you don't have a PhD, so you're not valid as a human being because we have this pyramid scheme and you haven't gone through it, Tanya. And so it's like they're trying to really hard to protect this old system rather than doing what's actually right for their students, which would be making sure that they're being taught new things. Like I literally talked to a bunch of computer science students. I guest lectured in person the last time in January of 2020. And I said, okay, so, I'm going to explain AppSec and DevSecOps. And then I was like, does anyone know what DevOps is? And they had never heard of it. And then I said, does anyone know what Agile is? And one of them said, I heard about it on my co-op term. I'm like, are they teaching you waterfall? And they're like, yeah. And then I looked at the teacher and I must have given like the death stare because he actually went like this. And I was just like, so the teacher, he was the cybersecurity teacher and he actually is the CISO for the province that I live in Canada and has been basically volunteering to teach at the university so that they can learn some security. And so he's covering CIA, identity, and all those things. And he's like, yeah, I basically volunteer at the university because I just can't stand by and not have this happen. And he's like, I would teach them DevOps if I knew that. Like, I know. But we can't expect that people are just going to volunteer their time for universities that make billions of dollars. Hey, could you come do this for free and do that for free? I'm like, no, you're rich. I know, because we can see. They're like, could you come in and do this for free and that for free? And I'm like, no, I'm going to do that for a community group instead, where they let everyone attend for free. You charge these students like $5,000 per year. You can pay me. So I have some feelings, obviously.
So it's a multifaceted problem, right?
Some of the problem is that we're not sharing information maybe as much as we could because of capitalism. So like, I feel like, for instance, the Canadian government has CSIS and CSIS is full of, or CSIS and CSE. So CSEC, the Canadian Security Establishment, the Communication Security Establishment Canada. I'm so embarrassed because I know so many people that work there. But CSEC is full of like these super brilliant geniuses that know all about it. And I'm like, you should teach Canadians. And they're like, we're not a school. Like, we have to secure Canada. We're kind of busy. And I'm like, but you're so smart.
And then it kind of falls into that, like, you just have the subset of people who have the time and are willing to teach, for maybe a less than they could make otherwise. And so we have an underserved segment of students, right, with all these people out there that are taking different opportunities. Yeah, that's an interesting kind of perspective and highlights, I think, that's a problem that's probably common in a lot of different, areas, right? Moving on to DevOps. How would you summarize what DevOps is and how that leads into DevSecOps and where we are today with this, the modern way of creating an application and making sure you're doing it right and efficiently and quickly?
So DevOps is a modern way of making software. So it's partially about a culture. So you can't really do DevOps properly unless you also have a culture around DevOps. It's where dev and ops don't work in silos anymore. So ops being the people that support the apps and the operating systems and all of the platforms basically that the software lives on, and the devs making the software and maintaining, like writing bug fixes, etc. And so they've sort of joined forces, usually into one team. And the idea is that they automate as much as possible. They give feedback as quickly as possible. Whatever they do, they work to try to make the entire system faster as opposed to just their part. Because I remember back in the day being like, I made an app, toss it over the wall to ops. That's their problem now. But now we don't do that. Now ops is our friend. And you follow, so I follow the practices of Gene Kim, Patrick Dubois, all those folks that wrote the DevOps Handbook, Accelerate, the Phoenix Project, the Unicorn Project, with the idea that there are 3 ways of DevOps. So the first way, speed of the entire system. So not just your part, very fast feedback, which for security is awesome because we want to give them security feedback as soon as we are able to. And then continuous learning and making time to improve your daily work. So previously, what we did with software like Waterfall is we would talk to the client and ask them what they want. And then we would proceed to build for 6 months, 9 months, a year, and never get feedback. We're like, no, you can't see it yet. It's not done. It's not done. And then, we would show it to them. They'd be like, what is this? That's not what we asked for. And if you look online, you can see stats anywhere from 30 to 70% of waterfall software projects fail. Yeah, and DevOps projects do significantly better. And so, DevOps, quite often to do DevOps, you use an automation to release your software, and automation for testing your software, automation for tracking every single thing you can. And it makes life a lot more fun. Automation, like making things automated, is super fun. And then not doing boring, repetitive work is also super awesome. And there's less errors. So you can tell I really like DevOps.
Yeah, I mean, we're all about that in any kind of security team as well. It's like, we don't want to click the buttons we don't have to click, right? Like, let the machines do the machine work. Let the people do the people work, right? Yeah. And so maybe that's a good segue into then bringing the word sec into it, right? Because that's DevOps, right? And so obviously DevSecOps then is bringing in the security team. And how do all of those 3 teams then work together to form this new world of now DevSecOps?
Exactly. And also, basically, it's adjusting whatever your application security activities are to fit into the processes with the DevOps teams, right? So I've seen organizations where the security team is like, they're over there doing their DevOps, and I wanted to do a code freeze for 3 weeks, and they laughed. It's like, yeah, because if dev and ops are doing sprints, your work needs to fit into sprints. If dev and ops are using a pipeline, some of your work needs to be in a pipeline, and you need to get to know that pipeline. And so if they have these processes that are working really well, you want to weave your security through them. And that's DevSecOps, the automation of application security and the reconfiguring of our brains so that we're supporting the way they're doing stuff, as opposed to kind of like fighting and clashing with them.
Yeah, as opposed to like trying to, at the end when they think they're done, be like, oh, also, what about security? And then everything just kind of breaks and it delays problems, right? I think the word that's used in the terminology is shifting left, pushing left, whatever you want to call it, right? Is the way of phrasing that?
Yeah, we want to start security earlier in the system development lifecycle and be there every step of the way with you in a friendly way, not a creepy way.
So in a practical sense, if a development team's been given, here, we need this new application, new code for a web app or whatever it is, how does the security team get involved in like every step of the way? Could you give us an example of what that would actually look like?
Yeah. So if there's a project starting, assuming COVID wasn't a thing, I would walk on over to the project manager, be like, hi, I'm Tanya. I'm your security person for this project. What's up? I would like to come to your project kickoff meeting. And then I would announce at the kickoff meeting, I'm your guy. If you need any security things, I'm here for you. I'm going to add some security requirements to your project so that from the beginning, you know what I desire to have happen. And then when you go through your design, I want to come hang out with you for one of your whiteboarding sessions. And then I want to point out potential security problems. And then I want us to fix them together. And then, when you're doing secure coding, I want to enforce some secure coding things with you. So I'm going to talk about hey, these are some things I'd like to see. And, could I test that? Or could I show you this cool tool? And I also want to talk to the project manager about adding a security sprint, depending upon how long the project is. So if it's a 6-month project, maybe one security sprint around 2/3 through. So I'll have found a bunch of bugs and things by then. And it's I want you to just fix bugs for 2 weeks for me. But if it's not in the schedule, it's not going to happen, right? So I feel like AppSec's a lot about relationships and talking to people and influence and not annoying the crap out of devs. Because I had a meeting just yesterday with one of my clients, and, we were meeting with one of the super high up devs, and I was explaining to him, listen, this is a negotiation. I don't have the power to actually force you to fix the things. I have seen devs go in and mark all my bugs as fixed, and I know they're not fixed. So I want to have a real conversation with you about what can actually happen and what can happen later, because I know you have a deadline, but you know that I'm worried about there's nothing worse as a security consultant if your company gets hit and it was something you knew about that you did not fix. I'm a different client, we installed check marks and scanned everything, and it found 40,000 problems. Yeah, and I said, we all laughed. And then I was explaining to him, so I'm going to tear through a bunch of these and come up with things that actually worry me and ask you to fix them. And I'm and then in 4 weeks from now, I'm going to come and see you again and be oh yeah, there's this other thing. And he's but it's the same thing you already found. I'm I know, but if I hand you 25 things and ask you to fix them, you're going to get stressed out. Because when I was a dev, I didn't like that. So I'm going to ask you about the most important 3 things, give you time to fix them, test them that they're okay. And then I'm going to go and give you 3 more things. And I'm just going to keep slowly giving them to you rather than giving you this giant report that I know you can't do, because this app is in maintenance. This isn't a thing that you open and fix every day. But every time you open it, I want you to fix one of my bugs. Right? And he's she's less scary than the last consultant.
If I can summarize that, it's making your presence known from the start, right? And saying, we are security people, you have security questions, we are here to answer those questions, maybe helping them with those unknown unknowns, right? You don't know what you don't know about security because they're not security people, right? So just saying hey, have you thought of this, in that right kind of spot, and then facilitating what I assume is testing and automation with security tools, and then maybe helping them understand and interpret those results. Is that how that goes?
Yeah, I would also say, so a lot of places I worked when I was a dev, there was no guidance about what the security team wanted from us. So they'd always say, no, not that, you suck. Well, what am I supposed to do? You should know. And so I try really hard to do the opposite of that. So literally every new project, here's your security requirements. Every single new design, I'm here's design concepts that I'd like to see applied. Can you pick one that we can put in, defense in depth or least privilege, et cetera? I see an opportunity here. I want a threat model, even if it's just super informal and it's 1 hour with the dev and business person to talk about what we can see, whiteboard it. Is there encryption here? Do you have authorization and authentication there? Are you validating the input from that API that's from our third-party provider? Because what if that's not good? And I have a list of questions I just ask, and then we fix those things. So every step of the way. So for when they're coding, secure coding guidelines, I need these 17 things from you as a minimum. And so every single step, I have something for them in the SDLC. And I know that people say, well, DevOps, it's continuous. Yeah, I know. So, but you still need requirements. And so if you're going to add a new feature, I'll add security requirements to your feature requirements. Mm-hmm. Right. And
that's not shifting left.
Yes. And if you have templates for your org, then it's a lot of, I used to joke it was a basket. I'm you're doing a file upload. Oh, this is in your basket now. What else are you doing? And then I would just toss things in, and then I'd be here's your requirements. And they're okay. But eventually then we had code samples to share too, right? Mm-hmm. And so like once your org has done a thing, I'm like, oh, actually this other team's already implemented that. So you can just copy their code because we pen tested it last month. So you don't even have to write it again. I just saved you like 2 weeks.
Very cool. So we as security team, I guess, might be involved then would be not only, of course, being present from the start, but in like the build pipeline, or you're like putting in all of your security bag of tricks, right? And, you compile a new version, it runs through code analysis, it goes through your vuln scanner and all that kind of stuff is happening like every single time.
I would say it depends. So every org has a different level of security they need, and they have a different level of speed that they need. So if a team releases once a week, I'm going to put every single big bang in there. But if a team releases 12 times per day, it's like, okay, so I'm going to do a full SAST scan, like static application security testing every Friday. And I'm going to look at the results on Monday and tell you, but I'm just going to test the little part that you just changed on every release, right? Because with SAST, to get a good picture, you want to do a full scan, but a full scan every time means devs don't like me anymore. It can also be, so for instance, you can do things before the pipeline as well. So let's say someone's going to check in code. You can do something called a pre-commit hook. So as you're checking it in, you can have it scan the new part and say, you know what, that looks like a secret. It says connection string, and then it says password equals. And I'm uncomfortable with this. So I'm going to just spit your code out and not check it in until you know this looks like a secret. Could you please check yourself? And so then you can, first of all, stop a security incident, but also it never even got to the pipeline. So we just saved a whole bunch of time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so there's like things you can do kind of in the pipeline. There's things you can do in the code repository. So like the code's just sitting there. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, I could just run a SAST scan against that once a week and not put it in a pipeline and then not slow anyone down. Or if you're doing dynamic application security testing, so apps like Burp Suite, Neuralegion, or like NetSparker, Acunetics, etc., you can have your QA team. So there's like a lot of awesome QA teams. And I usually try to be their friends because they're an awesome ally. Also, like, I like tech people, but specifically because I'm like, ooh, I can teach you security tricks and you can give me some of your automation files. So they'll record all these super cool GUI tests that are all automated in something called a HAR file, HAR. You can feed that in to a DAS scanner, to a lot of them that are on the market, and then it will just perfectly follow exactly their testing. And you could put that in a pipeline and spend 10 minutes with your DAS scanner, and that's it. And it's very directed at specific things. And then it skips everything else. And then you can test that outside the pipeline, because sometimes DAS get lost. And they'll just be like scanning all over the place. And like it, especially if you're doing any sort of dynamic pages and it's like, oh, I got lost and I'm just going to scan forever. And it spends a lot of time. It gives you more false positives that way. And so, yeah, I tend to talk to clients and see how much patience that their dev team has for them putting things in. And if they have a QA team that's already doing these awesome automation files, because that means they'll keep them up to date. Right. And so it's about like what they already have and how well you can serve them. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like it's a lot of, I don't want to use the word social engineering, but to some extent, like working with people in the way that meeting them in the middle of what they're willing to deal with, and also finding that balance between how much can you test, how frequently, and, like this is a short test, we'll do that every time, versus this is a longer test. We don't want to slow it down, but we still need to do it. When is the right frequency to balance with that?
Yeah. And also a lot of working with devs to help them actually fix these things.
Yeah.
So I've worked at a ton of places where they're doing amazing testing, like absolutely awesome. Like they have 7 tools doing amazing things. No devs look at the results. Nothing's getting actioned. They're like, we need 1,000 patches. And so I'm like, so that's what we actually want to talk about. Like, I know you're like, Tanya likes making fancy pipelines, and I do. That's super fun. But I'm like, what we need to talk about is like, why aren't they fixing the things? Are we not giving them the time? Do they have no idea what these results mean? Are these results going out into some weird third-party dashboard that's not where they look at their bugs? Can we connect those two? Like, what are our options here? Quite often, it's that the devs either are given literally 0 time to work on it, or they just don't know what to do. And like, I remember having someone, send me an automated scan tool report, and none of it had been validated. It was this big mess. And it was like, in my receiving opinion, it felt like your app sucks. Here's your report. And just explaining to them, this is what this means, and like triaging the results with them. Okay, so like that's actually not a sensitive value, so we don't need to freak out that it's in the code. Mm-hmm. I'll suppress that result from now on. Thanks for telling me, right? And so, yeah, there's a social aspect to it that I really like because I'm an oddly extroverted computer science-y person.
So one of the other things that I caught on that you said was, preventing issues and incidents like kind of before they happen. And just, obviously a little bit of prevention is going to save a ton of money downstream if you didn't do it. One of the big incidents in the news right now, the SolarWinds supply chain breach, right? We're going to see a ton of stuff probably like this in the future because honestly, everyone's getting better at security and it is getting harder to hack people, right? We're getting into zero trust. We're getting into all of these awesome DevSecOps pipelines and it's getting harder. So they're like, all right, we got to go upstream and infect the vendor or whatever and push it out as a trusted program. How might a DevSecOps pipeline or philosophy or strategy set up in an ideal organization prevent that kind of thing from occurring, before the point where it's, the backdoor has been installed and pushed out to people?
So part of SolarWinds was that they are so crucial to so many other systems that they were a very, very, very high value target. So they need to have a significantly higher security posture than the average company. So a lot of my clients are like, but SolarWinds. I'm like, we are so unimportant compared to SolarWinds. You don't want to spend $25 million protecting something that costs $1 million unless it's state secrets. But with that aside, I think SolarWinds had two major problems that I'm aware of. And one was that their private key was stolen. And so that's about secret management, right? Yes. And so we briefly talked about scanning your code for secrets. I don't know if the key was in the code. Gosh, I hope not.
I hope not.
But so part of that is like secret management and how to do that really well. And then the other part was that it was a supply chain attack. So they put something very bad into a component that they knew that SolarWinds needed to use to build their software. And then SolarWinds is used to build all these other things. And so we can protect the software supply chain in a few ways. So one is by using software composition analysis tools, or SCA. And so what they do is they look at all the different components that's in your software. So all the code that you did not write, but that you are still putting in your app and therefore is still your risk. And they basically compare it to a bad list. So each SCA company has like a bunch of software security researchers that will look at a bunch of the things. And then they also go by like ExploitDB and the CVE libraries and all of those. And they create this stuff's bad list. And then they look at, oh, Tanya has this NuGet package and that one looks very bad. It has these known vulnerabilities. So that's one way that you can do it. So I recommend that to everyone that's making software, that you verify your third-party components are okay with an automated tool. The tools are expensive, I'm not going to lie, but they're highly accurate. So it'll tell you, like, you have this version and we know there's this wrong with it, but there's a lot of false negatives. If you have something like SolarWinds where you need to have a very, very high level of assurance, you can review the components yourself, which I know sounds absolutely awful and a lot of work. So there's some companies like Sonatype and JFrog where they have a security team of security researchers that review in depth certain packages, and then you can proxy, basically download all your packages only from them. And then basically you only get like 10% of all packages in the world to play with to build your software, but they know they're secure. So that's an option, or you can literally review them yourself. From what I understand, IBM does that. IBM's gigantor, so they can afford that. And they literally, as of a few years ago, reviewed 100% of them themselves. The average company, that's just absolutely out of reach, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're Microsoft, you're Amazon, you can actually review them yourselves. But for the average company, I would say if you can buy a software composition analysis tool, or even like manually check your repository. So let's say you're like, okay, so I'm a .NET developer. I have a bunch of NuGet packages. I'm going to manually look them up on MITRE.com in their CVE database and just see if they're there. You will miss a lot of things, but you will find some things wrong. And so if you have absolutely no budget and for some reason you have tons of time to have security professionals do manual toil, that's an option as well. And so, for instance, I've seen companies in countries where the cost of labor is very, very low doing things like that. So there's a bunch of options that could help. If I had more details specifically about how the private key was stolen, we could talk about that, but I don't have it. And I wish the Solar team's incident response team a lot of hugs because
I'm sure they need it.
I feel for them. I really do.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, it's really less about that specific breach and more so just that we're going into a world where everything is going to be, infrastructure as code and serverless and containers and like all these buzzwords, right? All of it's ultimately going to be like, you're representing what you're building and running and deploying it all the time in code. And so something's got to check that, and you want security part of the process, right?
Infrastructure as code is so awesome because as a dev, I'm like, oh my gosh, infrastructure is mine now. And so you can scan it for vulnerabilities, just like you can regular code. You can check it into your code library. And also you can do security as code. So you can actually code in and make templates for all the different security configurations that you want so then you can enforce them. It's beautiful. Really, infrastructure as code is cool.
Yeah, it's a real like mind shift, but it's so incredibly cool and efficient. Like, yeah, I love it as a concept too. Just being like, I can just write this text file and the whole network will spring into existence in a couple minutes. That's insane, right? I hope it's secure.
I was working at Microsoft. I went on Microsoft Ignite the tour. So they did like 19 countries and I did like 10 of them. And so then someone else had to do my security talks at the other 9 countries. And so I made infrastructure as code to release out all my, so like I put like garbage into Azure. It was like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, malware. I was just like load vomit into Azure. And then like I showed them how to like trigger the things so that they could go investigate on stage and stuff. And they're like, yeah, to set up Tanya's app, I just like clicked these 3 buttons and then it set up my demo. And I'm like, yes. I was very proud of myself.
So with all this stuff, coming on very, very quickly in the last couple of years, obviously the pace of invention here is super high. Where do you see this going in the next maybe 3 to 5 years?
I see a lot more education happening. I see a lot of companies investing in their employees so that they stay. I see a lot of companies modernizing because otherwise the best employees will leave so that they can go do DevOps. Right? Like I've seen people quit and they're like, I want to go work there. It's like a $10,000 pay cut, but they're doing cool stuff. And I want to do that. And so I see a lot of companies, in order to keep their awesome resources, like training them more and like letting them do the cool new stuff. I also see a lot more breaches. I'm really hopeful that the governments of our world will take up some governance on this and start making like certain demands. So GDPR was a nice step. The privacy stuff from California, that's good. Canada has actually amazing privacy laws. I'm hoping one day we actually ever enforce them. That would be super cool. We're like super polite. We're like, oh, you broke the law and stuff. Please don't do that. It would be cool if we enforced the law. Yay, us. So I see the government slowly catching up. I hope that they'll talk to the security industry and have us weigh in rather than just have a couple staff members come together to build something. So I hope they reach out and let us contribute because there's a lot of big brains in industry and not all of them work for the government. But yeah, these are my hopes.
Yep. There's a lot of work to be done, it sounds like, and plenty of help needed in all respects. For those who are interested in this and want to get into it, where can we find additional information, resources on this, and where can we find all of your stuff online?
Okay, so I wrote a book called Alice and Bob Learn Application Security, and it is basically for any dev or anyone who works in IT, you can read it and then understand all the basics of AppSec. And I wrote it, so I don't know if you know, John, you do not make money when you write a book, but I was just like, I need people to know this. So if you're a dev out there listening to this, please read my book. I run a training academy on like how to do application security, and it's called We Hack Purple. So if you go to wehackpurple.com, there's that. Every Monday on Twitter, I run a program, I guess, called Cyber Mentoring Monday. So if you use the hashtag Cyber Mentoring Monday, every Monday, a whole bunch of us now across the industry offer to connect people with professional mentors. So if you have 2 years or more experience with what you're doing, you could be a mentor, even to just tell someone what it's like to do your job so they understand if they want that job or not, or recommend a book, or meet with someone online and have a virtual coffee with them and talk about, why you chose your career, because that might be the information that helps them decide. So if someone wants to get into this, they should use that hashtag to try to meet people in the industry who will help bring them in. My book, at the end of each chapter, there's questions. Like, if you were going to secure a car operating system, what would you do? And so there's an answer key, but it's very minimal. And so starting March 20th, I am going to do free online open discussions for 3 hours once a month. And I'm going to invite a bunch of guests from the industry to discuss the questions, and the public are invited to watch and interact with us via YouTube. So if you want an invite, and it's all free, because I'm really good at AppSec. I'm not very good at business. But basically, go to aliceandboblearn.com and then, give me your email, and I'm going to send you invites to all 11 sessions. So we're going to finish around a week before Christmas this year. And we're going to go through all of them and discuss every single question. If you read the book, you'll understand better. But if you don't, you'll still learn a lot, because basically I'm going to invite, lots of people from COAS, people from just different areas based on whatever chapter it is, so we can talk about it and hopefully help spread the word of secure software.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. So we've got a book, we've got We Hack Purple, the website, we've got the mentoring. Anything else you want to shout out before we close it up here?
My company is giving away a free mini course with AppSec. So there's always like 1 or 2 or 3 AppSec people and then thousands of devs. And so you have to scale your team. So I made like this little mini course that we're giving away for free about how to scale your security program without extra security dollars. So if you go to newsletter.wehackpurple.com, like you join our mailing list, and we're sending out invites. And then next month, we're going to run the free incident response course as well. And it's how to respond to incidents that have to do with software, because it's different. And like how to prepare and prevent incidents. And yeah, my marketing team's like, what if we just gave a lot away for free? I'm like, I thought we were already doing that. So I'm like, okay, sure.
Awesome. Well, very, very cool. Thank you so much for all the insight on AppSec and DevSecOps. Hopefully we've inspired some folks to chase this path as a career. Sounds like it's going to be something that's going to be needed far into the future. So thank you very much again for appearing on the podcast, and we will see you around.
Thank you so much, John.
All right. Catch you later. Hey, Blue Teamers. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Blueprint. If you've got a second and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It would be really, really meaningful to us. And if you have any ideas or suggestions, I would love to hear them. Your reviews are going to be one of the best ways to help others find this podcast. So anything you could do would be a big help. As always, thank you for listening. You can connect to me on social at SecHub, SECHUBB on Twitter, or on LinkedIn. So until next time, thank you for listening to the Blueprint Podcast.